welcome to another edition of Real Talk, Real Stories. And today I am joined by the wonderful Priya, who is our ACN Circle member. Before I ask Priya to introduce herself, my name is Advita Patel. I'm one of the co-founders for the Asian Comms Network. And if you want to find out more about what we do, then please do visit us at asiancommsnetwork.com, or you can follow us on any of our socials. Welcome, Priya. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm very well, thanks. How are you, Advita?
I'm good, thank you. The sun is shining in Manchester, so that always brings a bit more joy than the dull grey weather we're usually used to. And I can say that as a Mancunian, by the way. I'm allowed to slag off the weather in the north.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we've got some sunshine here in London too.
Oh, wonderful. Well, London's always full of sunshine, I think, generally.
Yeah.
For those folks who don't know who you are, Priya, do you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm Priya, founder and director of Preach Inclusion, Preach standing for promoting race, ethnicity, and cultural heritage. And Preach Inclusion is essentially a diversity and inclusion consultancy, primarily for the built environment sector, which is where I started my career about a decade ago now, when I think about it. And I initially started my career working in comms and stakeholder engagement. So I was that person going out into the community, liaising on planning applications, and especially trying to get people on side, because as we all know, planning permission can be very challenging, especially when it's a really, really large project in an area which already has quite a lot of development. So my role as a community engagement consultant was to go out there and speak to members of the public, local politicians, community groups, and so forth. But while I was doing this work is when I identified that my team wasn't very diverse and the wider property sector wasn't very diverse either. And we were trying to get these communities to buy into our planning proposals when we didn't really understand them and their housing needs. For example, multi-generational living, were we engaging with them in a language that they could actually understand, or were we just using planning jargon, for example? So all of these things made me realize that we were trying to get them to buy into us when we weren't really understanding them. And that's when I set up my own networking group in the property sector called Bayman Property. And it was really just about bringing people from ethnic minority backgrounds together to network, to talk about some of these challenges from an outputs perspective when it comes to creating and shaping diverse communities, but also to talk about some of the challenges that ethnic minority professionals faced in the property industry, very similar to what the ACN does, as a support network, mentorship, just kind of there to bounce and share ideas as well. And over the years, Bayman Property grew and grew as I progressed in my comms career. So I've worked at a number of agencies, including Cavendish Consulting and Grayling, which was most recently. And when I reached to the account director level at Grayling, I decided that then was the right time to leave my full-time job in comms and to run what was Bayman Property full-time. So 2 years prior to going full-time on Bayman Property, I had already incorporated it as a limited company. So I was working on it in the background, on my weekends, in the evenings, making some money from this little side hustle, as I may call it. And I turned it into my full-time job. And now I'm here 3.5 years later. 2 years ago, I rebranded to Preach Inclusion to drop the term BAME and to have a more inclusive and intersectional term. And this is what I do.
Amazing. Gosh, what a career journey that you've had. What I find fascinating, as you said, the built industry and the property industry isn't very diverse. It hasn't been for forever, as far as I'm aware. What drew you into that then, as a communication specialist? What drew you into that industry? Was there anyone that inspired you? Was it just an opportunity? Like, what kind of enticed you to be part of that world?
I think, admittedly, I graduated in politics and international relations from Warwick University, and I always had this dream to work for the Foreign Office like everybody does. And I actually did my very first internship at what was the Department for International Development. So I potentially could have gone down that route of international development, foreign office, foreign relations. But I found breaking into that sector extremely challenging without having a master's or speaking certain languages. And it's a very privileged sector, despite that most of the communities and countries that they support aren't necessarily privileged. So there was that huge imbalance there. But anyway, I did find it very challenging. A lot of the work out there was very much free internships, which, yes, you can do for a bit, but there comes a point where you want to start earning money. So I actually found a graduate scheme at a comms agency called For Communications, and I applied to be in their public affairs team. And this I felt was closest to what I had studied at university and felt most aligned with what I was doing, though not necessarily in international development. This was all working in local politics. And I did find local politics interesting. So I kind of just fell into it. I did my first graduate role at 4Comms, and then I dabbled into energy public affairs. I didn't really enjoy that. So then I went back into the built environment because I realized that what I enjoyed about working in the built environment sector was the different types of planning projects that there were out there. So I particularly enjoyed working on residential projects and retirement living, and just meeting lots of different people in my day-to-day. And every local authority is different, which is what made each project different. So there were some which were incredibly diverse, some which were more challenging. And I think that's kind of what drew me to the sector and has kept me in the sector as well.
Yeah, amazing. It's that kind of difference you can make, right? Because you quite clearly spotted, even though like the Foreign Office and the International Development Office is communicating with people from different backgrounds, different lived experiences, different demographics, social mobility and all of that, there is a sense of the kind of same echo chamber almost in those spaces. And I've got friends and family who've worked in those spaces and have clearly seen exactly what you've seen. And that's quite interesting, really, isn't it, Priya, in terms of representation and why we talk so much about it? Because to your point, when you were doing the work in the built environment and you're going around doing community liaison, you saw the difference in how people live and the experiences that they have, and how can you communicate with people and support people if you don't understand their perspective, right? Ultimately, which is a challenge in that. So when you were kind of building your career in this space, what moments, I suppose, gave you moments of inspiration to continue in this space? Because, when I've spoken to other people on these Real Talk, Real Stories, they kind of go in and out of different careers, different industries, different disciplines, but you've kind of stayed within that space. So you mentioned that obviously you saw the impact that you're having, but was there anything that was inspiring to you or made you go, this is definitely my space. Like, I don't want to go in any other kind of industry. This is where I belong.
I think for me, during one of my jobs, I was doing a lot of retirement living projects, working for one of the largest retirement living providers in the UK. And what I found so interesting was the retirement living model. And this one was very much geared to a certain type of demographic in the UK, primarily white British. I found it interesting that it was a very effective model. The idea was that older people would leave their family homes, downsize, move into one of these retirement living properties or assisted living properties. They would form their own community with older people whilst freeing up housing stock for families or growing families. So at a very macro level, it absolutely made sense. But it was a very specific type of population. And as we know from our census data, we have an increasingly ethnically diverse, religiously diverse population and an aging population. So when you put all of those together, our older population is massively changing. And the traditional model of retirement and assisted living does not meet the needs of our diverse population. It's not culturally sensitive. It doesn't necessarily meet their dietary requirements because you've got kitchens within these developments that essentially are cooking meat. And if you've got an older population that typically can be more religious or have more specific dietary requirements, then they're not going to move into these homes. But our sort of multi-generational family model within South Asian and Black communities is changing. Gone are the days where you can practically have sort of 8 to 10 members within your household because it's so expensive to have a large home that people are downsizing, or they cannot necessarily buy larger homes. So that's where this whole sort of diversity piece came into it. It was very much a lived experience within the South Asian community, and it was something that just needed to be talked about. So we talk a lot about later living properties. It's a thriving market, but are we talking about culturally sensitive later living properties? And that's something that I'm deeply interested in, and it's something that I have done talks about at retirement living conferences. It's just something that I find so incredibly interesting, that it's an area that I want to be doing more work in as well in the future from that diversity lens.
Yeah, and it's such an important area because there's so much stigma attached to it as well, still in the kind of South Asian Black communities, because, you know, historically your role and duty as the daughter, son, you know, whatever, is to look after your parents as they get older, and that is changing, right, in terms of behaviors, economic climate, you know, the challenges that we face and all that kind of stuff. And it is really interesting to hear the dilemmas that my friends themselves go through in terms of, as their parents are getting older, like, how can we manage this? And they don't want to put the parents in a home. That's the kind of stigma attached to it, that you quite clearly identified. Some of these retirement places are not suited for older parents from different cultural backgrounds. And I've seen friends put in elderly parents in these homes, and they've just, you know, some of them have declined, sadly, because they feel even more isolated, and the guilt is real. Like the guilt that sits on your shoulders as a daughter or a son who's had to do this has made it really difficult to have this conversation. So I'm so chuffed that you're having these chats, opening up these kind of channels of conversation and making sure that we do have places and spaces that are culturally supportive of whatever your background is and your cultural preference, right, ultimately, as you said. And it makes a difference. So that's, you know, incredible. And I can't wait to see more of this stuff. If people are just on this topic, Priya, people are interested, because I know there will be folks who are like, how can I kind of find out more, get involved? Where would you suggest they go? Like, what's the first step they should take if they're looking for more support or information in this area?
I think if it's from that kind of personal perspective, there are certain later living complexes out there that do actually meet the needs of very specific populations. So there's a few in Harrow, and this is very synonymous with areas in the UK that have large South Asian populations. So Harrow being one of them, Leicester being another. And there is actually a cohort of later living complexes that are specifically designed not necessarily for the South Asian population, but when I visited one, it was primarily South Asian older people. They have a vegetarian and no eggs kitchen only. So you are guaranteed to only get vegetarian foods. And then they can also further personalize your dietary requirements as well. For example, if you have no onions and garlic, or if you have a Jain diet, for example. And they also have a priest that visits this particular later living complex twice a day, because it keeps the community spirit up and it gets them involved in activities. Most of the care home staff also speak a range of South Asian languages, meaning that there's that kind of language connection there as well. So it's really, really important. And I think it's a really good example of how, when you meet culturally kind of sensitive needs, actually the kind of life expectancy and the enjoyment of older people enhances, because they're in an environment which is way more appropriate for them. Of course, for many South Asian individuals, they want to be able to look after their parents, but a lot of people out there are a part of this kind of generation known as the sandwich generation, where they're looking after children, but they've also got older parents because of longer life expectancy. And it's just not possible, especially with our financial sort of challenges that we have in our society and employment issues that we also have. Sometimes it is more pragmatic to have your older parents or older family members in a more appropriate setting, which gives them that enrichment whilst you get that peace of mind as well.
Yeah, and independence, right? Let's not forget about that, because I think that's another thing that we talk a lot about, you know, the support and stuff that we can potentially give. But like I said, sandwich generation is challenging. You know, people are having children a bit later. You know, the work pressures are real as well, and then you want to make sure that your parents have the support around them, but the independence you can give them as well. I think this is definitely a topic for us to talk about outside of this conversation, because it's a much deeper conversation I think a lot of folks will be quite interested in, without that guilt, like I said, or that worry, or the like, because it is worrying and it is anxiety driving when you see parents get a bit older, in terms of what support can you give them. And moving away from that kind of mindset of that, additional pressure that we can sometimes put on ourselves. So definitely something to note for an additional chat with you. But going back to you and your career, looking back, did you ever feel like you had to adapt or code switch to fit into a world that wasn't representative? And what impact do you think that had on you if you did have to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the kind of memories that really stays with me is when I started my grad job, and I was taking my lunch into work. I still lived at home with my parents, with my family, which was very, very normal after university to sort of go back home and live with my family. And that was a very, very strange concept with some of my colleagues who, one of them actually said to me, "Oh, you still live at home? Like, you have to let your parents know if you're going to be staying out to come to the pub after work." And I said, "Well, yeah, like, it's not like I'm seeking permission. It's just informing them. It's more of a courtesy message, just to let them know that I'm going to be coming home late, or I might not be joining them for dinner that evening, or having it much later." And they just found that such an alien concept that I just started keeping that really on the down low, that I was spending a lot of time with my family. Or even when it came to taking lunch into work, I got a lot of questions, or sort of looks when I had Indian food, and I would just say to my parents, "Look, I don't really want to take leftovers. I just want to take sandwiches if I'm taking a lunch from home, or pasta." And I don't mind that, but it wasn't necessarily last night's dinner. Sometimes my mum would be going out of the way to make a completely separate lunch, which was unnecessary, even though there was food left over. So it's almost as if I was concealing parts of my identity, parts of my Indianness, just so that I could fit in within that work environment. Then over the years, that sort of dropped, and I didn't really care, and I would still take food from home into the office. It became more and more normal that people were living with their parents. Certainly during COVID, it became like an absolute normal thing that a lot of my work colleagues, I was in a different workplace at that time, but a lot of my work colleagues did actually go to live back with their parents because they had to, circumstantially. So I think attitudes have shifted, but it also meant that when it got to the conversation about home ownership, I got onto the property ladder very early, because I'd sort of done that time with my parents after graduating, whereas a lot of my work colleagues were renting still. Again, nothing wrong with that, but it was a conversation that just was to be had. And as I was explaining this kind of narrative and this sort of norm around, actually, yeah, a lot of South Asians do this, where they just stay with their parents to save money, and so we can get onto the housing ladder very quickly. Again, it just was something which they didn't really understand or appreciate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame attached to it, right? I would think exactly the same. I still live with my mum. Like, I used to be so embarrassed about saying that in the early days. There's so much judgment attached to it, but I'm really proud that I do. And we have a great relationship, and I think sometimes staying quiet about it and not talking about it because of the shame attached to it. But like you said, COVID changed it completely. Now I know many of my friends who have moved back in with their parents, or have had no option but to do that, or wanted to, because of loneliness they faced and isolation they faced in COVID, which made them realize, actually, I don't want to do this. I want to spend time with my family and stuff like that. And I enjoyed that. So I think it has definitely changed. But I remember in the early days avoiding talking about my home situation, and not really talking about it at all. There was just so much stigma attached to it. And the kind of almost like, "Oh my God, how old are you?" It's a bit
literally,
"Your mum makes you lunch." I was like, "Yes."
Yeah, I know. I got that as well.
Like, yeah, she does. My mum still does, right? Like, well, occasionally now she has kind of, like, get yourself sorted, Advita. But it's just a normal thing. Like, but it is, you're so right in some of the stigma attached to that, and how you hide parts of yourself just to fit in. It's really interesting. What's the kind of boldest career move you've made in your 10, 15 years of working in this space?
I think definitely quitting my job, to run a side hustle full time, especially because the way that I quit my job was also very interesting as well. We were on a sort of team trip to Paris for the day. It was meant to be like a team away day. And on the way back, I said to my line manager, look, I have decided to quit the team. We were on the Eurostar back from Paris, and we definitely had a few to drink. So I don't think he took me seriously. So that following morning, he phoned me up just to double check. He was like, were you being serious? I'm like, yeah, I was being serious. But that weekend, I felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Like, I was so ready for this. I mean, you know, obviously there are times when you don't feel ready, but I just thought it was the right time for me, financially, professionally, personally. And I was like, it's now or never. If I don't do this now, I never will. I might get to a stage in my life where maybe I move up the career ladder in an agency, I get to associate director, and then it becomes much harder to just leave something behind, because you're leaving behind a much higher income. And there's just so much more at stake as well, because you might be in a different place in your life personally as well. So for me, it was the right time. It was bold, and it was something which I'm so happy I did, though I didn't tell my parents for 2 years, because there's, again, this kind of stigma within the community, which is of like running your own business, especially when they don't really understand what you do, which is very much the case in my household. But I think for me, I just really wanted to prove that I could do it. And after 2 years of having really good revenue, running my business, I then told my parents. My siblings already knew, and they just sort of kept it on the low for me. But when I told my parents, I said, oh, by the way, I'm not just working from home all the time. I actually run my own business, and I have a lot of free time. And sometimes when you call me, I'm out and about shopping or at the gym or something. And it was just completely new to them. And now they don't mind it, because they know this is what I do. But it took me 2 years to actually get the courage to tell them that. So that was very, very bold for me personally and professionally. But I'm so glad I did it, because of all the opportunities that have come my way since I've gone full time. I've rebranded my company. I've launched loads of new things. I've worked with and met incredible people. And I, at the start of this year, found a really, really nice happy medium where, because I was missing sort of working in the corporate world and missing that team time, I found a contracting role, which I do sort of 2 days a week, and then the rest of the time I just work for myself. And it really is the kind of balance that I just need in my life. So I'm really pleased with that.
Love that. I love that experience of telling your parents, because I had very similar kind of worries in my mind, because, you know, my parents work for themselves. So I always kind of grew up in an entrepreneur type of home anyway, but they worked really hard to make sure that me and Darini, who's my sister, wouldn't have to sacrifice anything, you know, as we got into our careers, and then wanted a really steady career for both of us. And both of us went down the non-traditional routes as well, which is, as you said, and what I mean by that, for those folks who may not understand, is that often there's an expectation that you would go down a career that's sustainable, like medicine or dentistry or
accountancy,
or, you know, a push lawyer. Those kind of professions that they feel really proud to stand by. Explaining to your parents that you are a communications professional is really interesting, because they didn't understand. You know, I had to do a lot of education, and then Darini went down and studied English and linguistics at university, which is a very different background. I did IT, but even then they didn't really encourage working for yourself, because they knew the challenges involved in that, and they really wanted us to have a steady income. And a secure role. So when I came to leaving my career, I had similar challenges with that as well, in terms of how would they see it. And they were, you know, I'm lucky they were supportive but worried. I think that's the way I would look at it. They were
agreed. I think very, very similar. I think my parents definitely had those questions. My mom especially. My dad kind of just let me get on with it, but my mom was like, you know, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm fine. Like, I'm here, like living, you know, my best professional life at this moment in time. Like, this is the best professional life that I've had so far in my life. And so I think it's just a case of, because it's the unknown for them. They've only ever seen stability around them when it comes to careers. And my dad wanted me to become a pharmacist, and you know, that didn't really happen. But I think they've accepted that I'm just a little bit different. And that probably comes to, you know, maybe a little bit to do with the fact that I'm a middle child. I'm a little bit more creative. and I'm just a bit more of a black sheep when it just comes to doing my own thing. Like I will go with it, even if someone says no.
Yeah. So funny because my parents wanted me to be a pharmacist as well, and I actually did study. I worked at Boots for a week. Like I was the oldest Saturday girl at Boots. I started at 16 and didn't leave till I was 24, doing
Wow.
healthcare pharmacy stuff. I know it's wild, but I remember my pharmacist Nigel in Boots saying to me that it's definitely not going to be the career for you, because he could see that it was doesn't suited my personality trait.
Yeah.
But I studied chemistry, biology at A level, and chemistry just ruined me. To be honest, Priya, I still got PTSD from it. So
Oh, wow.
I realized that wasn't the career route for me.
Yeah.
So it's so funny that we both had the pharmacy angle in the family.
Yeah.
When was the first time you saw someone like you in leadership in your kind of industry and profession?
I think when I worked at Grayling, so that was just my job just before I left to be running my own business. And I saw that their chief financial officer was a South Asian woman. And I just find her so incredibly inspiring. We are friends as well. And even to now, she's so supportive of my work. And I'm so supportive of what she does and what she's done for such a big, well-known agency like Grayling. So I found her incredibly inspirational. I believe she spoke at one of their International Women's Day webinars. And that was like the first time I really heard from her, because I didn't really have that much interaction with her because she was finance and I was comms and we were completely different departments. But after hearing her and then interacting with her in the D&I committees that we had formed at Grayling, I just found that we had so much in common. We were from different generations, but we had our South Asian culture in common, and that was just really, really nice. And her name is Jo Kanani. She's the she works at Grayling, and she's absolutely incredible. So just a bit of a shout out to Jo. But she is just wonderful, and I'm just so glad to have met someone like her.
Oh, it makes such a difference when you do see a leader like yourself. It's weird. It's a really weird thing to explain to the dominant culture on how that feels when you do see a familiar face. Like I try to explain to my friends, because I remember getting really excited when I saw the first South Asian woman, a leader. It was probably about 12, 13 years into my career. That's how long it was. But I remember texting my friend and going, "Oh my God, like this person started." And she's like, "Why are you so excited?" I was like, "Because it just feels so familiar. It's so nice to have somebody who just kind of understands." And I think people who are not part of the marginalized or underrepresented groups is a difficult thing to explain, because it is that inner feeling, as you said, and having that connection. Love that. That's amazing. So shout out to Jo. Fantastic. And then finally, Priya, what's it feel like being part of a community like the ACN? Like, what does it mean to you personally?
It's so nice because I didn't really have a community like this very early on in my career. So I'm so sorry for that noise, by the way. So sorry. I didn't really have this community early on in my career. So I always felt a little bit lost. So it's just so nice to be able to connect with people who just get you. When I came to an ACN event earlier in the year, I had met some people for the first time, but I had conversations with people like I'd known them for much longer. And I really connected with people. And it's just nice to even have the WhatsApp community to be able to, share posts with each other and just be each other's cheerleaders, because no one's going to do it for you. We all just have to make that effort and do it for each other. So it's just nice to have that supportive community. So thank you. Thank you to the ACN.
Oh, thank you for being part of it. I think you're spot on there. It's basically, I was trying to describe it as like you've just got a group of people who've got your back. That's what it feels.
Exactly.
Group of people who've got your back, and you can go into that group and say, "I've had a really rubbish day," or "I've had a great day," and "Have you seen this?" And you just feel safe to be able to talk about. And that's how I would kind of describe it. Like you said, it's like what we just spoke about, our kind of inspirations in the workplace, like you with Jo and stuff, and having that person just kind of get it. The kind of nod, the acknowledgement, that kind of stuff just makes a big difference. And then final question from me: what is the best piece of advice you've received in your career that's really helped you, that may help others who are listening to us today?
I think I would say, someone once said to me dress for the job that you want, not for the job that you have. And it's something that has just stayed with me. He was someone that always looked very, very sharp anyway. And maybe I didn't take it very, very seriously early on in my career, but now it's something that I really, really take seriously, that kind of identity piece, how I look. And even when I do my events, I always want something kind of showing through, that kind of cultural heritage, that sort of South Asian identity showing through. So I'm always dressing in a way that feels like me, that is an extension of my identity. And I just want to say to people, like, don't be afraid to express your identity, because when you feel comfortable, you look comfortable, you just do and perform so much better as well.
Yeah, love that. And I completely agree. Your outfits are spectacular.
Oh,
That
thank
mix
you.
of, honestly, like the mix of like the East South Asian influence, the kind of East meets West thing, and you represent that beautifully. So definitely, like, it's noticed, I would say.
Oh,
that
thank you. Thanks so much.
Oh, you're welcome. You know, credit where credit's due. You definitely show that. So, Priya, people wanted to get in touch with you if they've got any questions for you. What's the best way for them to connect with you?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Priya Aggarwal-Shah. I have my company page, which is Preach Inclusion, and you can also connect with me on Instagram as well, which is Preach Inclusion, and Preach Conversation, which is our events arm where I host live conversations with authors, with really inspirational people, and hopefully I'll be doing something with you, Advita, as well in the future as well. So yeah, come and connect with me there. Come along to one of my events. I would love to see you there.
Amazing. And what we will do is put all Priya's details in the comments as well. So if you're watching this on replay, please do send your questions if you've got any questions for Priya or anything like that. But we will share all her details in the show notes so you can connect, because that's what this community is about as well. It's raising visibility, it's connecting with each other and making sure that we have each other's back as well. Well, thank you so much for your time, Priya. Loved this conversation. If you're interested in joining the Asian Comms Network, then you can follow asiancommsnetwork.com, and we've got all the information on there. Or feel free to DM us as well. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram. So feel free to send us a message and we can send all the details over to you. And I just shout out to Harsha, who said that she also loves being the black sheep of the family as well, and she's with you. So well done. And here's to all those people who stand out and are the black sheeps of the family, because great things are definitely happening. Thank you again, Priya. We'll see the rest of you very soon. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you.